so I'm going to call to order at 6:30. And if we could all please start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Devin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you very much. First order of business is public comment. So we will open the floor now for public comment from our participants and attendees. Again, the process works as follows. If you do have a comment that you'd like to share, please raise your hand, and then Devin will make sure you have the availability to unmute, and you can provide your comment at that time. Okay, just one last call for any public comment. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to next order of business, which is minutes. So could I get a motion to approve the attached February 10th, 2021 minutes?
So moved. Johnny.
Second it, Sharon.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Oops, sorry, I jumped in too soon. Opposed? Okay, unanimously approved. Next order of business is correspondence. This was correspondence received between the time frame of 2/6 to 2/19, 2021. We have included both of the comments we did receive in the agenda, as well as the comments from Pierre and the questions on the reimbursement rate and the additional questions Pierre had. There are responses also included in the agenda, so that's kind of to complete that conversation, as well as we've also included the correspondence from John with suggestions, and that's what we received via written correspondence for that time period. Again, we do ask others to keep using that engagement form on our website. We appreciate that level of engagement. So again, if you can't make it to the meetings to provide public comment, that's a great way to get to us to ask questions and provide comments and feedback. So we're really encouraging people to keep using that as a way to stay engaged with the project. Okay, we're going to move right on to reports. Chair report is first up. I think we're going to receive much of our information in the reports that follow. So we will obviously hear a little bit more.
Meg, I believe you're
Okay.
mute.
Is that better?
Yes.
How far did I get? What did you hear last?
I didn't hear a thing.
Nothing. Oh, you just saw my lips.
We're gonna
moving.
learn more
Nothing
later.
yet.
That's what.
Yeah, we're gonna learn more later.
That was,
Did I get through correspondence?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we just started reports. I want to.
I guess the best way is you were segueing into me, right?
I think so, Chris. Just from a chair reports perspective,
Yeah,
we're gonna toss it right over. I think because we're gonna
Yeah.
get a lot of detailed information moving forward. So, Chris, if you're
Sure.
up there for town,
Yeah,
council, that'd be
Sure.
great.
I by way of town council, I'd like to update everybody that at our meeting on February 16th, the project was discussed and taking into consideration a number of factors: summer vacation, Memorial Day, the application for state financing. The consensus of the town council was to try and move forward with a special town meeting for the project on May 24th with a referendum date of June 3rd. So that's our goal and to be discussed. And we also tomorrow night have a special meeting which on the agenda that town council will discuss and give direction as to the 1928 building. And considering a number of the factors that we've discussed, what our intentions are with the building, given that it has community interest and a lot of attention, and the needs and space community, and the issues of renovating, mothballing it, using it for future purposes, what those purposes would be, and whether the decision is to do not include it on the referendum now, but given the students will be occupying it for a period of time, do we defer the decision to some point down the road? So that will be our discussion at our special meeting tomorrow night.
Great, thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris?
And I would encourage, obviously, everybody to participate tomorrow night.
Great, thank you. Communication Subcommittee report, Kat, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So the Communications Subcommittee met this morning. We had a productive meeting and talked about ways that we can engage parent leaders, PTO organizations, neighborhood engagement, and kind of just setting this, starting our community engagement plan and public informational meetings. We had talked about last time how we wanted to do topic meetings. So we kind of narrowed down 6 topics that we would like to do. And we are going to put together a calendar and hopefully get those going soon. So does anybody from the committee have anything to add? Okay, so I think that's it.
All right, great. Thank you, Kat. Financial Communications Subcommittee report. I can certainly provide this, but is there anybody from the committee who wants to provide any detail on this? I can jump in if necessary. We did have a Financial Communications Subcommittee meeting following the information we received from the financial forecast from Town Council. Now that we have a better understanding around the financial impacts of the high school project in context of the entire financial forecast, we as a group sat down. Ira was participating with us as well to talk about what's the best way and how do we make this information most clear for the entire community to really understand, and how do we put that in context of the value of the building and the solution that we're providing and the cost associated and what that impact would be. So we're going to continue those conversations, but it was a good level set once we had some actual real information to work with, now that we have a better understanding of the overall scope and estimated cost of the project. So it was a good meeting. I think it helped us understand, and Ira's giving us some good direction on what's most effective. How do we include that information in the newsletters? Is it best to show it in, a graph or a chart, or what's the information that people really need in order to understand how that data, just the cost data, can be used in context of the project, and then use that to help make their decisions as they're thinking about, the referendum and what they'd like to do there. So I think that's pretty much where we landed. Was there anything else anybody else wanted to provide on that one? All right, great.
I'm sorry, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Ira.
I think we also wanted to do the impact per household, that using those numbers that your finance person did, because when it boiled down, it showed the cost once the bonds retire, the actual impact over 6-7 years, which presents a pretty good picture about it being, instead of talking about the big number, which
Right.
becomes very abstract, 120, 150, it's really the impact on a household. And if we keep focusing on that, then people understand the implication.
Yeah, perfect, Ira. Yeah, and I think we can, as we're focusing now and really thinking about communication strategy with Ira's help, these are the things we just want to make sure everybody's super clear and has a really good understanding, because all those numbers can sometimes cause confusion, and there's really no reason to be confused. We just need to be able to present that information in a way that makes sense to people. So more to come on that, but we've started those conversations and want to make sure that we do the best job we can around communicating those impacts. All right, great. So we'll move right on to Board of Education Liaison report, Beth.
I don't have anything to report. I just, as far as an update, the board did present to town council the capital request for next program year. That was on this Tuesday. Let's just to keep you in the loop on that.
Lot going on, correct? A lot of things happening right now. All right, great. Financial report, Kat, this is back to you.
Yes, I think Devin has an updated copy that he can share on the screen, but not too many updates since our last meeting. We did have a few more surveys trickle in, and as you remember, we have to pay the postage for the return of the surveys. So that was added to our expenses. And then I did include, there's an invoice for IRA that's on today's agenda, so I included that in the professional partners invoice section, leaving us with a total on hand of $135,337.89. So not too much of a difference.
Great. Any questions for Kat? Okay, excellent. We have items 7 and 8 on our reports listing, and I'm actually going to respectfully ask that we're going to defer both the state legislative update and the industry update to have those updates included in the new business item that we have included. That's new business item 1, which is to approve the amended cost estimate for the FHS building project. So I think the information that they're going to provide in these updates is helpful for us during that conversation. So keeping those two things together, I think makes sense. Will make our conversation more productive. So for right now, we're going to defer 7 and 8 until new business, which then leaves us to move on to presentations. So what we have slated for today is presentation of community survey results by Tall Timbers Marketing. So Ira, the floor is yours.
All right, showtime. Devin, can you transfer over for me to show it? Okay, thank you. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Everyone see, if you're on a small screen, I can enlarge it out if you want. This is a more full report. I mean, I have the report we did to the town council, but it's all based upon what you're going to be seeing now anyway. So I'm going to go through this, and what you're seeing in yellow highlighting here, this is all the quantitative information. We got back 1,111, kind of lucky number there, total surveys. 23 were unscannable or readable, 7 did not answer the number 1 question. And so basically, statistically, this is what we call a 97%, if we repeat it over and over to everybody, it would be 97% effective in terms of what we could use as our information. Better way to say it, minus a 3% error margin. So in other words, if we had every household respond back, the answer is percentage-wise wouldn't change very much, if at all. And even when we got the extra ones that Kat sent over, didn't change the percentages. Those were well over 100 on top of that. All right, so we're starting here. What we want to know, the basis, again, of doing this survey is creating a baseline of understanding and what the community knows about the project and what they want to know about it and how they want to get information. And who were they based upon the demographics and what we have to think about going forward. So the first question, are you aware of the building committee? 50% said yes, 30 no, 37 fine. So that means the majority of the respondents here were aware of the project. I'll keep scrolling down here. How important to you to get information? I know it sounds like an easy question, but you'd be surprised how many people don't treat it as the most important. So anything over 50%, close to 60, will bring down as important. So it's quite evident people want information. Are you aware of the statement of needs? 62% said yes, and 23% somewhat. I was interested in that because that hasn't been floating around a lot. So they're somewhat familiar with that and not quite sure where they're getting the information other than going to the website. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's good to know they're at least aware of it. Have you been willing to view the architect's schematic? 38% said yes. But keep in mind that's relatively new. That was from last fall. 62% said no. And this, we're asking now what are priorities for the project. So we asked a series of questions. Would you like to know the priorities for the high school project? And this one focuses on current facilities, limitations, and issues. So 61%, we're only picking the top two here, or the top two in terms of percentage-wise. So 61%, yes, that's a major impact. That's a pretty good number we should be focusing on. Enhancing the educational programming, that was at 57%, and that's again another good number. Improving the learning environment, that's 62%. So those are what we call value questions that kind of give us an indication they understand or want to understand more. Are we prioritizing what actually is going to be happening in a new high school? And so that, obviously just a really good responses back. Improving the school non-classroom facilities. It's a little bit more over the place. And that meant probably auditorium, gymnasium, other secondary spaces. So that means we have to talk about the value of those things, because most people respond to this, think of only the classroom. These aren't bad numbers if you go all the way down to 3, but I think it's important to think about these as more discussion about the overall building usage and how other non-classroom or teaching, formal teaching is going to affect them, excuse me. Security and safety, that's a no-brainer. That was 66%. Ed number 3, well over 80%. Flexibility, adaptable space for community use. There was interest in it. We came in kind of all over the place, but obviously it shows people say, yeah, you know, it's good to know that. And the cost implications here, I'm sorry, this kind of, which came in the highest, and that came in at 74%. Which I'm not surprised. So 74%, and that was not the highest one in terms of percentage and one priority or second level. How would you like to know about? So now we're asking questions. Well, I'm sorry, these were comments, and I'll go through, wherever there's other, people fill out comments. We asked people, and now we're going to decide, which is, how are you currently getting information? So this is currently based upon when this survey went out under a month ago. What are the top 3 ways you're getting information? They're getting it from the school district newsletter, the town newsletter, and word of mouth. It shows the other social media, teacher, staff, newspaper. So what's coming here is you got the town crier and your two pieces of materials that go out, communication pieces that they are getting their information from, which is pretty good. That means that we should continue to use that. Then we asked, are you go to town meetings? How important? It wasn't as high. That the ones who go are aware of it or watch it online. They are recognizing a town meeting is important. The school district newsletter at 65%, really important to keep that in mind. That was a really high number. And this is even higher than the parents' response. So that means people who don't have kids in school still appreciate getting the school newsletter, the district newsletter. Social media, and I'll explain, this is a really low priority. Now, this is a generational thing. And I'm going to go through the statistics here later on, what this means in terms of communicating about the project. It's a high preference for some of the people, and even taking into account, it's the bigger number to worry about here is a low preference and saying, what do we do with social media? The building committee website, top 3 here is pretty good. That means they are going to it. So they're aware of it. And the town website, not bad either, 48%. And the town newsletter by far is the biggest one. That was 74%. So the town newsletter is where people are getting the information. So we have to think about when these newsletters go out, providing even more information. And this surprised me a little bit. This is unusual. This to me was a little outlier. Many surveys we've done like this, teachers and educators come usually higher. And again, I can explain this when we look at the demographics of the people responding to the survey. usually they like to hear what teachers and staff think about a project like this. So there's an opportunity here to think about that. The newspaper, as you know, doesn't have the effect. If this was 5 years ago, you would have seen 40% up here. The average age of the reader of the Hartford Current, 62 years old. And then the other publications. So people are either, they're not getting it, not reading it, or it has a low priority. And look at this, remember word of mouth on the upper one was the third one. They don't want to get information word of mouth. And this is pretty common when we do this survey. They're getting the information because they're not getting from other sources, but they don't want to get it that way going forward. They want to get it from the documents, which I made very clear up here, which is going to be the town newsletter, the building committee newsletter and website, and the school newsletter. Those are great vehicles right now, and they're still coming very high in terms of how they want to get information. And word of mouth wasn't very popular. Again, we added that in the comments. And this is what was the most interesting thing here for me, that the majority of people who responded have lived 11 or more years. And a higher number is 20 more years. And you'll see this in the demographics, obviously own their own home or rent. I assume there's some condos in here too, but my sense is most of this is people who own a freestanding home in Farmington. Or they work full-time or they're retired. Now, this is where the anomaly is. 17% of your population makes up over the age of 65. And taking into account the error margin on this 45%, it's the gap between 45% and 17% who actually fall in the demographic of retired or over the age of 65. We're not surprised here working full-time, and the other ones were more minor, not working. So you have people working full-time, made up of parents and other people, but the biggest response in terms of percentages was from retired or elderly population. And this is where I was talking before. This was a little surprising to me. 239 households to have kids in school. It should be probably close to, on this one here, this should have been at around 50%. And again, I can surmise why they're not, why we had such a low number of parents filling this out. And if you add together, it's totally representing 445 kids. Now, statistically, this is, we can work with this, but I think, Kathleen, you have over 4,000 students. So this is barely above a 10% response rate. And my suggestion is the lowest response rate were from elementary parents. And then there's private schools. Now, I'll entertain some questions here and go through if you need a little more detail, but these are statistics. Most of you have seen the survey that went out, and this is the response. The thing that really impressed me was that close to 10% response rate, which is exceedingly high. In fact, it's the highest of all the 25 years of doing this. I've rarely seen it go 5 or 6%. So obviously there's interest, and obviously, the newsletter did its bit. And I think the thing to keep in mind is this demographic group here is how we balance and deal with this. And many of the retired people don't go online. They don't do social media. They don't do Zoom meetings. They are more traditional in terms of how they want to get information. So that's the overview of this. And I created more of a summary report for the town town council. Is there any particular questions right now? Because I'm going to go through the comments next. Nobody? Okay, good to me. Now, we got 177 comments. Statistically, it's usually 25, 30% comments. So this was only around 16%, 16.2, which is, it's fine. It's a guideline. The comments were interesting. I broke them into these categories, positive comments, which to me was a good sign. We when doing these surveys over the years, rarely do we see maybe 3 or 4 or 5 comments. This one, you got 33 of the 178, and that's not bad. I yellow highlighted the areas where people don't have kids in school anymore. And these are things to keep in mind when we're trying to reach out to the aging or the elderly that represent many turns of the survey. That, you know, my kids went through it, I have grandkids that are through it. And so I yellow highlighted the ones who gave those comments, and it's we can probably use these. That shows that there's some support from, you know, people, families that don't have kids in school anymore. It's probably why they still live in a community. It could be grandparents in some case, but I think in many cases they're, you know, some are retired and some are still working and their kids are finished going through the public schools. And so our kids are in college, but as homeowners and community members, we value education. Now, if we can get 45% of the population out there to believe that, and I'm sure there's people, a lot of people out there who do feel that. Soon we'll have grandchildren entering. It's important to preserve integrity, quality, educational system that have served our children so well. No children, but niece and nephew and husband attended. We need new safe facility. My 3 kids graduated. What a terrific education. Thank you. My 3 graduated from a high school, great school system. Keep up the great work. So these are non-solicited. And this is somewhat unusual to get these kind of comments because we didn't ask them to give us positive comments. They just volunteered to do that. And so, I mean, there's a lot of good ones when you see this report, and we'll send it out afterwards. I wanted to show it to you. If anyone is on the committee, we will definitely send it to you. And then the thing I'm mostly interested in, what we need to work on, people who took the time with specific questions. This should be a focus going forward on the second newsletter and answering these questions or going a little more in depth. And so a yellow highlighted here, there was a bunch that came back about projected popular enrollment, projections, student growth, what will be the impact to the current students, is there a future decline in student population? So I think we have to answer that question on the next newsletter. And kind of separate out, does it matter if there's 100 kids more, 100 kids less? Does it change the way that the new building will be operating? Because we know space is used differently, but we do have to address that. There's also about if you start it, when are you going to start it, how long, the construction schedule, and then there's the cost ones. Can we see the cost for the the building, the timeline? As a senior, can I reduce or eliminate my tax contribution to this project? How much will the state give? So these are things you're familiar with, but again, they propped up as questions. And again, we probably have to address these. And then the other ones down here I thought were important to know for questions. Will project oversight manage quality of work and protection materials? How disruptive for current students? What would be the disruption? How are you going to deal with traffic? Pretty practical questions here. So again, we probably have to answer these a little bit more. And the status of accreditation based on this. And then there's a bunch of other questions that were, well, kind of, some wanted to have a swimming pool on here. Is that planned? Why wasn't this done a while back? What happens to the existing high school building? And I think we have to, and we have mentioned that, but I think we probably have to deal with that. But these are kind of single areas here. But these were kind of bunched together. So to me, they have more impact and things that should be more addressed than ones I've highlighted here. There's also people who are concerned about COVID, ADA, and safety. I kind of lumped them together, ADA compliance, about COVID, how are we going to deal with this stuff. This was interesting. Pandemic has helped us focus on better planning. So that gets into not just the security, but also the safety in the building. So people might be interested in airflow circulation and health areas that might be important to do. And dealing with there's some ADA issues in here at special education. And the other section, these are just recommendations or general comments. They weren't asked as questions. They probably could have turned into it. This was here, there was some interest in, is this gonna be energy efficient? Is there green technology involved? So it's percentage-wise, this would be, if I broke this out, it'd be around 10 to 15% interest in community members about the idea of energy efficiency and using latest technology and so forth. Then there's some all over the place here. Save the original historic building, use it. Those are the only two that came up. Maintain high education, improve graduation ratio. I'm not sure what that's about. You already have a high ratio. Explaining non-classroom facilities used by public. Well, that came up. We asked that question. Robotics, you update the auditorium. So these are kind of all over the place. It's just like people giving their opinions. I want a culinary program. Have major issues causing a drop in SATs. So there's negative comments in here. I've kind of bumped them all together. Don't make a castle or prison out of it. We already have senior center, town hall. So a lot of this has to do with explaining why this building is necessary. But, you know, I think those came up in the questions above. And then, you know, and then you got some, I would say, general comments. They sound a little silly, but they are there. Apartment people fill up our schools. I have no idea what that means. I don't have any children. Resale my home. Too late, but let's get this done, and so forth. So those are kind of like statements. And then up to there's around 54 questions, all about the taxes and the cost. I didn't highlight them. They're pretty repetitive. Keep the costs down. I don't want my taxes to go up. A lot of them say I'm seniors. You know, I don't want to pay for this, and so forth. I'm over 65. Stop wasting money. And this is very typical, but as a total response rate, percentage-wise, it's not that high. And of course, we're going to address what the cost is and what it is. But I think no matter what we say to people who don't want this, it's, you know, it's a hard time convincing people saying this is worth your investment. And it's better to go, I suggest going up to the questions, answering these questions and continuing the ones we had already listed. That's what I got out of reading the results. Is I think the questions are always more important to answer than the comments are interesting. It's not, I disregard those, but you know, it's more important that if someone takes the effort for a question, that provides us an opportunity actually to deal with the comments. Does anyone have any questions about this? I think, Devin, you sent the quantitative out, didn't you?
I did, yep, earlier this afternoon.
Because I don't see a picture of you folks right this moment, but if you want, we'll, obviously we can send this. And then Megan, then we should probably, after presenting this, the idea of posting this on the website, you guys can make the call on this. But I wanted you folks to see it before I recommended posting it.
Let's start with any questions for Ira on this information, or, you know, thoughts, comments around, you know, what we're hearing and what we're learning.
Any surprises, things and thoughts, anything like that? I don't think there's anything that comes out of here that I would say, my God, you know, what are we trying to do here? I think this is pretty normal, actually. And I don't see, it's nothing here to like, oh my God, you know, let's not do this again. And part of the thing, people fill it out, and again, the comments are helpful, but percentage-wise of all the surveys, it's usually we get a higher rate. But given that we still got 177 comments, it's still very usable material or information.
Great, yeah, and I think this is an important part of us informing that communication strategy that you're helping us with, Ira, figuring out, you know, we know vehicles, content, getting out in front of the community and working on getting some of those questions answered for people to make sure that they really understand and get the, you know, the information that they're going to find valuable.
Yeah, so it's kind of the next round is like, okay, you know, what is this all, what are the things now we're going to go into it? And it's the second newsletter I would call like the value one, that we're going to talk more specifically about how the new high school will, improve the educational experience without taking away that the kids are still doing good today. It's a fine line.
Okay, any questions or thoughts on the committee? All right, I guess more to come.
Yeah.
Let us absorb this. And like we said, I think as a committee, we should be looking at the communication subcommittee obviously has a focus on this as well. But as a committee, we should also be looking for opportunities and thinking, I think, what's the best way to support the communication efforts moving forward and how best we do that. So, that's something we'll be talking about a lot, I think, as we move forward and really thinking about what the strategy looks like and how all of us can participate in that and, try to get this information out to as many people as possible so that they can make an informed decision.
Yeah, I think this is a good guideline. It's giving us the voice of the community. I don't think it's negative at all. I think the feedback, in the most part, was intelligent responses. I think the audience, again, we have to think about is the elementary parents. They're going to be most affected, and right now they're just not paying attention to this.
Yeah, so I think we have an opportunity there.
Right.
We can help them, and I think we have some ways to do that. And we have to be flexible, and because that's the world we live in right now. Is to be able to I think it's just tough to absorb all the information coming at us at once, and parents especially. And so I think, having that information just lets us really prioritize and make sure that we're focusing and getting the right information out.
And just one more comment.
Yep.
The thing that makes it tougher today, all these delivery systems, between social media, the website, email, paper, they all have to be used, given the demographics of your community. There isn't one over the other. And some are going to be just as interested in Facebook responses, go only to Facebook. Some are going to want to just get emails. Some are going to want to go to Zoom meetings. And I think the next round, I suggest we think about that in terms, we did talk about the subcommittee, Kat, about how delivery systems, what's the message, who are the messengers, and what are the value messages? And they have to be folded into. So when we highlight those 6 or 7 things that we're going to do through a subcommittee, that would be really important, to do. And I'm concerned about, making sure our seniors, they're more interested in getting paper.
Yeah.
And so we have to, that's why the newsletters, I think, will be a big help there, and the town newsletter and the Board of Ed newsletter. So Kathy, you might want to think about how we can use your school, use the Board of Ed newsletter. And, I know it's complementary to the building committee newsletter, and same with the town.
All right. If there's nothing else for Ira, thank you, Ira. Appreciate the information.
No, thank you.
All right. Next order of business on the agenda is item H, new business. And the first item up is to approve the amended cost estimate for the FHS building project. So if I can get a motion to approve the value engineer cost estimate for the FHS building project. And just before I turn this over for that motion, there was a note included in the agenda packet as well that just gives us a little bit more detail around this agenda item. So, this is really an effort to continue to value engineer the total project cost and identify potential cost savings, while really looking at a reimbursement rate and how all those factors affect the estimated cost. So that's the conversation that's going to fall underneath this agenda item tonight. So if I could get a motion to approve the value engineered cost estimate for the FHS building committee, or building project, excuse me.
So moved, Johnny.
Second, Wendy. All right. I'm going to open it up for discussion, and that means I'm actually going to ask both, I think Mark, I think you're going to go first tonight. Mark and Chris.
Yeah, that's fine. So Devin, you want me to share my screen?
I could do that. You cannot share.
All right, I think you should be good now.
Okay, let's see what we got here. All right, I'm going to shrink everybody here. 2 a.m. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just over the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the following 2 slides, which provide a new budget recap based on the 2021 reimbursement rate changes. We've recognized the rates and it results in about a decreased reimbursement of about 1% from our original projections last year. Based on that information and given the town council's charge to keep the net town share within that range of 105 and 110 million, the professional team went back for a deeper dive into the cost estimates to find some opportunities and ensure that really the committee meets the charge while incorporating the new rates. And so I think it's important to mention that we continue negotiations with the state. And really the first slide here is to recap a recap of rounded costs, while the second is going to show the proposed reductions, reimbursement rates, and really how the professional team derived at the numbers. So if we go through this first page here, the budget here shown in millions, you'll see the first column on the left-hand side identifies our budget categories. So design fees, professional fees, construction costs, etc. And across from left to right, you've got our original first column there is February 2020, so back towards the beginning of last year. This was our original cost estimate, what we presented to town council. We had come up with a grand total of 142 million with an estimated state reimbursement of about 28 million. That's combined for total project, and an initial net town share of 114 million. In May, as we were just about to go on pause, we made adjustments to the budget based on a town council's charge to again stay within that net town share of 105 and 110 million. We made some reductions here to the construction costs. We pulled out some nice to haves and reduced the overall square footage of the building. We made some changes to the FF&E and technology budget and the contingency budget and came in at 137.3 million. So with an estimated state reimbursement of 27.5. Since then, and most recently now in February of 2021, we took a new approach with taking into consideration the new rate changes and dividing up the 2 buildings into the 900 wing and the new building construction. We recognize that the state is allowing this portion of the work here in the 900 wing to be submitted as a separate grant with the reimbursement rate of renovate as new versus the new construction rate for the new building. And so we separated those out. We took a deeper dive into these numbers. You'll see between these two here, it's 5.6, so about 100,000 less than our May adjustment on the design fees. Same thing, about 100,000 less than our professional fees. And then we went down considerably in our construction costs, down to about 115 million from 117. And then FF&E technology, it stayed somewhat the same, so it's off by about $30,000 based on the rounding, and then the owner contingency, sort of same thing. So new grand total of this year 135.8 with the reductions and net town share, a new net town share of 109.5 million, so a little less than actually where we were in May. So we sit in a little better position than we did. I'm going to share now with you how we got to those numbers and the recommendations that everybody's reviewed and voted on. So here we've got our working document. This is how we put together the numbers. Same budget items or categories here on the left-hand side. You'll see again the May numbers, most relevant, most recent. And then here the February 2021 breakout between the 900 wing and the new building. The 900 wing represents about 4.36% the total costs of the project. And we have plugged in the new rates here. You'll see the reimbursement rate here for renovate is new is 28.93%, and the new construction is 18.93 here. So as we go down and across the way for each category, this again, here's the $100,000 reduction in the AE design fees, another $100,000 reduction in professional fees. Within professional fees, that's made up of project management fees. There's fees in there that we have set aside for testing, inspections, surveying, and there's bond origination fees. There's lots of things that are lumped into that professional fee, and we feel comfortable with that $100,000 reduction in that number. The construction costs, these two numbers here add up to that 117 with some of these new proposed add alternates. So if you remember in our last process, we selected 4 add alternates that are nice to haves and could be added back into scope depending on the bidding process and the market conditions. We feel that we've identified another 4 proposed alternates that we could add to that list that could come out of that original cost estimate. So these dollars here, these deducts result in about $1.2 million of items. And I'm going to ask Richard as soon as I finish up with these numbers to kind of talk us through in more detail what these add alternates represent to the project. The FF&E technology numbers stayed pretty close to the same. Owner contingency, you'll see we split that up a little bit. And then the grand totals, the new grand total would be 135.8 million here. State reimbursement, total state reimbursement now is 26.3 million versus the 27.46. So again, we had 137.3, you got 135.8. We've got 27.4 here for estimated state reimbursement. So again, total reimbursement for both the 900 wing new building combined. And then the net town share now would be at 109,564,503. So a little bit better than we were in May. And again, that's a result of the new rates and the proposed add alternates. And that's all I have.
Richard, do you want to walk us through some additional detail?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
So first, let me just remind the building committee that we had alternates built into the budget previously. This was after a round of effort. Last year, we deliberated with the committee on several items and ended up with 4 items that would be nice to have. However, and we said we could certainly add them back in if bidding would be favorable. So those 4 alternates that we agreed upon last year were first the motorized partition between the gyms. The second is stone veneer in lieu of masonry on the lower portion of the exterior wall. We had an additional ball field. We called it a softball field, but it's just an additional field. And then we had additional FF&E allowance. You may recall that we had a higher FF&E budget previously, but and that was based upon a per student calculation. When we went back and looked at it more closely on a category basis, in other words, so much for classroom areas, so much for offices and so on, we were able to reduce the FF&E allowance. But FF&E is the kind of thing that we could certainly add back in if the bidding is favorable. So we have included in the previous value engineering list the opportunity to add that back in, and that's why we called it an additional FF&E allowance. So when we were faced with the reimbursement rate that Mark talked about a minute ago, we had to go back to the cost estimate and see what we could do. And I think the best strategy to take, again, these are add alternates. We could certainly add them back in if bidding is favorable. And so we're suggesting 4 additional alternates be added to the project to keep us on track to meet the goal established by the town council. The first of which you can see there says anti-graffiti sealer, $351,590. I make this recommendation because you may not need it. You know better about your experience in the facility when it comes to anti-graffiti on the interior walls. We have in the building design and the budget ground face masonry. This is a polished masonry interior, which is very durable. We have included in the budget anti-graffiti sealer, but you actually may not require it. The sealer is something that you may want to add depending upon your experience with graffiti in the past. So I'm recommending that be an add alternate. The next item is vertical aluminum sunshades. So we have both horizontal louvers on the exterior to cast shadow and reduce the solar load on glazing. And then we also have vertical aluminum sunshades, although the vertical components are not significant sunshade elements. It's the horizontal components that are significant. The vertical ones are more of an architectural feature to create a shadow, to create some sort of accents vertically, to give more variety to the exterior. And in my mind, it's similar to the masonry add alternate, the stone add alternate that we talked about last year. So the vertical aluminum sunshades are nice to have. It's not necessary. They were not taken into account in calculating the energy load on the building. Again, if budgeting, if the bids come in a favorable way, we can certainly add them back. We can do some more studies to show the effect from an architectural standpoint. But I think that adding this to the add alternate list is the right thing to do. The next item, the wood acoustical tile in the atrium space. Remember, we have ceilings in the atrium space. We have budgeted in the project wood ceiling tiles. This is a louvered system. So for those of you who may have visited Guilford and some of other projects that we've done, you know that we like to use some wood ceilings in public spaces. It adds a lot of warmth to those spaces, but it is expensive. It's more expensive than conventional acoustical tile. What I'm suggesting is we take half the amount, the premium that's associated with wood ceilings instead of a regular conventional acoustical tile, leaving half still in the project. If we do this, then we could add this add alternate of $320,000 to the list. And the last item is a line item in the cost estimate that's identified as other signage and graphics. It's really not specific. So we have already built into the project signage and graphics that are necessary for meeting code, for directions, for anything that is required for wayfinding in the building. But then there's this line item in the cost estimate that says other signage and graphics. Perhaps these are area identifications, the such and such auditorium, the such and such commons room. That item hasn't been identified. And it doesn't necessarily have to be paid as part of the building project. It certainly can be added on much later in the project as we're ending construction. So I'm suggesting that this item be added as an add alternate also. So this would total 8 add alternates in the project instead of 4, but this is what I'm recommending be added to the schematic design, and then we make a revision to the schematic design to show these alternates listed. That will get us back on track to meet the town council's goal. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Richard, I think it's just important to add too that again, you know, and you did touch on that too with the other signage, but I think all of these are none of these are critical path items. And so we could really hold on to these through the bidding phase and even into the start of construction before we needed to recognize whether or not the market was favorable enough or whatever it might be. So the decisions could come later on in the project. That's correct. But in order to get to the goal line here, we do need to identify these as add alternates. Correct. Yes, I meant if in prioritizing the add alternates list during the bid phase and during into construction, these particular items could get pushed out considerably. None of these items are affecting the program, square footage, numbers of rooms. They're not affecting any of the mechanical items, energy saving items. So they're strictly nice to haves, in my opinion. Yeah, and you're right. We can defer the decision until after bidding. Thank you. Thank you.
Richard, John Carrier, good question. Are there any other kind of key items that you looked at but did not ultimately consider on this slide? That if for some reason this were to go the other way and costs were to go up, that you have kind of another hidden list of options that would not affect curriculum or things like that? Is there a couple that come to mind?
Richard, you're muted.
Sorry, Johnny. We did come up with a list that went below our target, and then we decided not to include them. And I honestly don't have that list in front of me, but yes, we did go further without affecting program or components. And I don't know, Mark, if you or Chris recall any of them as an example. But yes, Johnny, we did go beyond the target. Yeah, I think we talked about things like mirrors in the fitness room, things like that. There were some ancillary things that that were discussed. I don't think they added up to the dollar amounts you see here, but there were some other items, and I don't have the list in front of me either, but that could ultimately be discussed if but I think these were less of a priority than the others.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The committee need any more explanation around anything you see here or concerns around these additional items as add alternates?
Meg, hi, this is Ellen.
Hey, Ellen.
I just want to make an acknowledgement to our professional partners, our architect and CSG, you know, for the reductions to the design fees and the professional fees. We see that we as a building committee, I know we all really value your partnership, and I just want to publicly thank you for working with us to get to our goal. We appreciate it.
Meg, it's Michael. I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Michael.
But it isn't necessarily specific to any of the items that are in here. So I'm going to do two questions. The concept of distinguishing the different reimbursement rates for renovation as new and new building. Would we have been doing this? I I guess what I'm wondering is I don't recall this level of wing and then building in a previous analysis. Is this something that would have been an avenue we would have pursued? Is that how you felt we would have got to the 20%, or how?
So we looked at it as a whole with new construction. We had originated conversations back in beginning of 2020, end of 2019, right around that time frame when we were going through the architectural concept competition, design competition. This was a conversation that we had with Costa and the state in terms of how he'd like to see this. And one of the things that came up was this was, as we were still going through the conceptual designs. So to say that if you're going to do this, and you're going to use the 9-100 wing, there's a possibility of an option to, roll all of this in as a separate grant application as a renovate as new. The conversations that Chris and team had with Costa most recently was to confirm that he was still going to honor those discussions. And so when we got confirmation that that was the case, we built this in.
Okay. The other question I have is that I want to make certain that I have clarity around the particular statute that governs the state reimbursement percentages. And I'm not as schooled to this as others will be who are on this call, so I just want to ask the question. The overview that's found on the CT Gov page indicates that reimbursement percentages are calculated annually, and each project receives a reimbursement percentage based on the date the town or district secures the local share of funding for the school construction project. I guess my reason in asking this is the date that's secured related to when the application is filed, or is the date that's secured when you actually have a referendum that's in the affirmative?
It's when the referendum passes.
Okay.
So we're a referendum community, so it's when the referendum passes.
Okay. So I want to ask the question then from the perspective of the rate that you're quoting or that you're using for the projections right now is for 2021. If we're having, what is the date that you have to have the referendum by and have it pass in order for that 2021 rate to be applied? In other words, what's the date after? What's the date? Is it July 1, 2021?
Yes.
So it's after June 30th, then the rate could go up, down, sideways, whatever.
Correct. So it's June 30th is the deadline. It's the grant application submission deadline. It's also the deadline for the referendum to lock in the current reimbursement rate. So should the referendum pass this year prior to June 30th, as council is indicating, then this project locks in the reimbursement rates that we currently have. Then after that, after July 1, this project is not subject to any of the changes in the reimbursement rates for the town of Farmington moving forward. You lock in the rate.
So I just want to make certain that we have that clarity. And then the last question I have is one of a formula for the calculation. I understand that it's based upon our grand list in order to figure out what that reimbursement percentage is. The percentage that we have now is based upon the grand list is published on what date?
So the new reimbursement rates are not published yet for 2022.
But what I'm saying is the one for 2021, that is based upon our grand list as of what date? The rate that we have now, the rates that you're using in here, they're based upon the grand list on what particular date?
So it would have been based on the 2020 grand list because the rate effectively changed July 1 of 2020. So the current rate goes from July 1 of 2020 to June 30th of 2021.
Okay, and when do we know the grand list for 2020? When does that become available?
I don't know.
When did it become available since it's
Our grand list was due early February, so we have the latest grand list, and it's included in our current budget process that we're going through right now.
So what I'm saying is the grand list that governs the reimbursement that we have now of 18 point something, that was available in February of 20.
Yes, it's submitted annually at the same time each year.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions. I appreciate the work you've done in putting this together, and would echo Ellen's comments in recognizing the piece that our two groups have absorbed.
All right, thank you, Michael. Any other thoughts or questions?
Wondering if I could ask a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam, please.
So I'm wondering if you foresee any other complications that might come up with this approach. One that I'm thinking of in particular is with the referendum wording. So I know the wording that you need for a referendum for a renovate as new is much different than one for new construction. You know, in other words, you have to say what your anticipated share is. I believe you have to bond for the entire amount for a renovate as new. And also the other complication that I'm wondering is if it's different between new construction and renovate as new would be the items that may or may not be reimbursable.
Kent, do you want to take the wording question?
I mean, we work with our bond counsel on the wording, and we have to be very specific. You're right, Sam, on those things. So I think that's something that when we bring them into the loop, we have to be very clear about and consider, and make sure we're wording our referendum question appropriately to include all of these things. But that's bond counsel that helps us do that.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
And Sam, was there another half though to your question? I'm not sure if we got it all.
Well, the second part would be, I know with renovate as new, there were certain items that were not reimbursable at the same amount. For instance, well, we don't have an auditorium in that section, so I know that wouldn't come into play, but bleachers, those sort of things. Whereas new construction, it's more, that's your rate. You kind of go forward as a project and you know what you're getting back.
No, so that's not correct. So in fact, there are certain items that are subject to limited eligibility or a 50% eligibility. Those are auditorium seats that exceed more than 50% of the total projected enrollment of the building. The cost of the actual seats themselves are considered limited eligibility. And that works for both new construction and renovate as new. There's no differentiation there for that. Purely the biggest differentiation between new and renovate is your overall reimbursement rate. The renovate is 10% higher always than new construction.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
It's Megan. I just want to be clear because I know in the beginnings of our conversation way back when we first started this, we got a good education about what items are reimbursable and not reimbursable. So I'm wondering if I think maybe that's what Sam's getting to is like, are we sure that everything in the 900 wing is reimbursable?
Yes, everything in the 900 wing will be reimbursed at the renovate as new reimbursement rate of 28.93%.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On the sealer, the anti-graffiti sealer, is that bringing it down to 0 or is there some left in the budget?
That particular line item is brought down to 0.
I mean, and you know, we don't have to talk about it right now, but there might be a need to put something back in, you know, a small amount. It's really limited to certain areas of any high school, not just FHS.
Okay, so we can certainly add that as the project moves forward, if there are certain limited areas, but I think what we had carried was quite a lot, quite frankly. So,
yeah, that is a lot. So I think it's limited, and maybe because it's limited, it can, you know, we can just move forward and see where things are. The other question is just on the signage. I just want to make sure that we have clear signage. Sometimes that was, you know, an issue, not only at FHS, in many schools across Connecticut and beyond. Signage is always an issue. And I just want to make sure there is clear signage in the budget, and something that would be substantial in identifying it as Farmington High School. You know, currently we have Farmington High School across the front. I again wouldn't want it to be 0 and then find ourselves in a situation where, you know, there isn't clear signage identifying the building.
no, this line item I did not bring down to 0. So this was some excess signage budget, I think, that we're comfortable adding as an add alternate.
Thank you.
And again, the add alternates mean that they will be included when we go out to bid, and we can then pick and choose. And there's ways to go around that as well. So when we eventually have a construction manager on board, we can structure the bid packages with these add alternates as, so for example, the anti-graffiti, we can do a square foot cost breakdown, you know, or lump sum. There's ways to go about that. We can break out the signage, and we can have specific. Right now, we're lumping it in as a large one line item idea, but we can, that signage may be 2 or 3 add alternates, you know, by the time we're done, depending on what we're actually trying to achieve, so that you kind of get a menu to choose from. And then depending on how favorable the bids come in, you then have the ability to pick and choose. And that happens, quite frankly, on just about every project.
That's helpful.
If I could take a minute and just pick up on what Chris said about favorable bids. So we recently had a bid within the past couple of weeks that came in. This happened to be in Manchester. And on that project, the bids came in 15% less than were estimated by professional estimators. So if you could bid like tomorrow, that would be great based upon the experiences that we've been having. And as you heard Chris mentioned earlier, that, you know, the reimbursement rate is declining. And so right now you're in a position to lock in the best rate that you have. And next year, it's not going to be the same. I mean, if you look at all the reimbursement rates in the chart that Chris and Mark shared with me, it's declining everywhere. So now's the time to bid it. I know that it's going to be a while before you do, but I did want to report what's going on in the industry right now. So your experience in a different sector may be different. I know Johnny is in a different sector of construction, but in what I'm seeing in public bidding, it's very favorable right now.
It is. Public bidding is very favorable right now, but I guess what everyone needs to keep in mind is that we are probably a year and a half at this point away from a bidding environment, and it's really hard to tell what that's going to be as we sit here today. So we need to keep in mind that the estimate right now is based under normal conditions, not necessarily the conditions that everyone is under right now. Even though, yes, everything that's bidding today is coming in very favorable, there's a lot of time that's going to lapse between, now and a year and a half from now when we're ready to go out to bid. So, everyone just needs to keep that in mind.
You're correct. Yeah.
So I think to that point, I just, this is my own kind of evaluation as we look at this information and not having been on a building committee before and kind of understanding what our role is going to look like after referendum if it was to pass. I think this is a kind of a good understanding of, we obviously have to go into detailed design. There's going to be a lot of conversations around those things. So Chris, I think that's a good example to let us know is that, there are going to be a lot of conversations like this, even in more detail, that we're going to have to talk about and think about. I think with keeping in mind that, as Richard said, keeping us on track within that budget is really our job. So this is one of those things that we need to do based on the information we received. And this will obviously continue as we move forward and certainly beyond referendum as we're really, moving forward on the project in detailed design and as we move towards build. So this was, it's kind of putting it all in perspective and thinking beyond referendum. Oh, you're muted, Chris. I don't know if he was talking or not.
Chris, your mouth was moving, but no words were coming out. So we weren't sure you were saying anything or you were just...
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anybody else have any thoughts or concerns, questions that they want to talk about right now before we actually move into, because we are going to have to approve, remember, we do need to approve as a building committee these changes so that we can update the schematic design appropriately and still have an appropriate and correct baseline.
One last quick question.
Yeah, Johnny.
Saying that the referendum passes in the near future, how when you start going to construction documents and into your code cycle, which codes do you guys design to? I know that we've been in flux as a codes and standards committee, and I don't know if you've heard, but we scrapped the entire 2018 package a couple weeks ago. We're working towards a fall of 22 implementation of the 21 set of codes. But it just in curiosity, is it when you pull the permits, and at what point does that happen, pre or post bid process?
So that's a very good question because we went through a code change not that long ago and we had to project which code was going to be in effect when the building permit is pulled.
Okay.
So we worked toward whatever that code is going to be. And I know that in Connecticut, it lags behind the International Building Code, for example. And we try to keep track of those kinds of changes that you just cited. But in this particular project, if it goes according to the schedule, post-referendum, I think the town council is talking about authorizing design work to start right away. We would be looking at bidding in 2022 and construction starting in late 2022 or early 2023. So we would have to anticipate what that code will be at that time.
Is that good, Johnny? You all set?
Yeah, sorry. You did.
Okay. We all are doing that tonight. It seems to be a lot going on. All right. Any other thoughts, questions? This is, I just want to make sure we really do have a thorough understanding of this and that everybody's comfortable again, with the understanding that we really just expanded the ad alternate list from 4 items to these 8 that have been recommended in front of us, as well as the addition in the fees to get us within that net municipal project range. So below that 110 cap set by town council, which puts us at that 109.5. Okay. All right. If there are no other questions or discussion, then I think we need to put this up for vote if everybody is comfortable. All right, excellent. All right, so all in favor of approving the value engineered cost estimate for the FHS building project that is presented at the meeting this evening?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Do you need a motion, Meg?
I did it way in the meeting before
Right.
discussion, Helen. So I think we're good, right? Or am I good, or do I need to do anything else?
No, you did a motion before the discussion. I think it was just some time ago.
Okay, yes, it was. All right. All opposed? All right, great. Unanimously approved. So we will go ahead and this will obviously be included in the follow-up documentation from this meeting. And then Richard and Mark and Chris, you have everything you need at this point. Do you need anything else from us?
No, we're good. We'll go back and modify the schematic report. We'll make an amendment.
All set right now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And then we'll make sure that gets cascaded accordingly for communication. So the schematic design presentation that's on the website will get updated accordingly. We'll make sure that everything is aligned and that we have all that information where it needs to be. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate the conversation. So we do have one more item of new business that is on the agenda, and that is to approve the attached invoice from Tall Timbers Marketing in the amount of $6,000. If I could get a motion to do so.
So moved.
Seconded, Chair.
Okay, any discussion? I don't know if you want to pull that up, just the invoice is included in the packet, but this gives you some more detail. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, also unanimously approved. And the only other order of business we have on the agenda for this evening is adjournment. So if I could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, this is Wendy.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned as of 7:53 this evening.